Okay, so here we are to have a brief discussion on paradigms. So we are going to make some questions, and I would like to know your answers to one thing. And the first thing is why you are interested in paradigms in such a topic. Sina.
So I'm a PhD student, and I started getting interested into the topic or into paradigms just because I was attending a great seminar. But then also in real life, being a PhD student at conferences, for example, it was very interesting to see people from qualitative and quantitative paper presentation talking to each other. And there was kind of a tension. It was something like misunderstandings. And I was wondering, okay, what is happening here? And actually there I realized it's not a boring topic. It's very interesting. It has a real impact. And this is also how you start reflecting on the topic on your research.
Okay.
This is why. What about you, Christoph?
Well, I'm a professor of cross-cultural management, and for me, culture is very close to paradigms. Culture is values, assumptions, interpretations, how we see the world. And I think it's important, if we want to understand each other, that we have different worldviews and different assumptions. And it's the same with paradigms. We have these different worldviews, and we should talk about it.
Okay.
Jaime, what is for you?
Well, for me, something I would say surprising, right? That we are talking now even about paradigms, because it was there is like a very personal reason, because the first presentation I ever did at the university was on paradigms when I was a long time ago. And then many years later, I was asked to teach a course on paradigms, something that I didn't expect. And I was very doubtful just to know whether it was an important topic, a relevant topic. And then I found out that it's something that everybody talks about and everybody has a lot of difficulties in understanding, right? So we need to do something like that, something about that.
So Sina, you as a PhD student, how would you define a paradigm? What is a paradigm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of difficult. I would say it's a worldview, actually. And it's how we see and approach our research phenomena. And there are different perspectives. And as I just told you about this kind of tension between people when they are talking about, for example, qualitative research and quantitative research, and it seems as if they wouldn't understand each other too well, I would say there we see kind of these different perspectives. And as you see right now in the slide, there is a problem, because if you see something from the standpoint of the person having the 6 in mind, you will never ever understand someone who has the 9 in mind then. So you need to change perspectives. And I think this is why it's so important, because I started thinking about, okay, isn't there a possibility to understand each other somehow with these different paradigms? And then we came across this picture, right? And it was so interesting to see, because have a look at it. If I would see it, I would just say, okay, it looks like a rabbit, right? But some people would say, no, Sina, it's a duck, actually. So knowing now also for the audience that it's both, I think it changes the whole view on the art. So you kind of understand a little better in a more sophisticated way what the art, the paradigm, or the research can be about. Mm-hmm. So, Christoph, for me as a PhD student, I would say it's important, right, to talk about these paradigms. So what do you think? Why for management students, they are so important, these paradigms?
Yeah. I think it's first of all important to have an awareness of these paradigms, that they exist, and how we look on the world, on methods, on research questions, on phenomena. It's deeply influenced by our worldview, by our paradigms. So first we have to have an awareness. And then we have to accept that maybe another researcher, another person has another paradigm. So he will have another perspective, another worldview. So I really plead for tolerance, not to say my worldview is right and yours not, but to be more tolerant and to have a more balanced view, in fact.
I think I fully agree with you, Christoph. And another thing that perhaps is very relevant for the students is that, of course, that tolerance is key. But you might be happier working with one paradigm than with another. And sometimes people are not fully aware that there are different possibilities, and you are simply forced to work a certain way, to make the research questions a certain way, to conduct empirical study, and you would be much better off working under different assumptions, different traditions, right? So I think that it's important to be open to study alternatives, not simply to tolerate, right, which is true, but also just to decide what kind of life as a researcher you want to have.
And also reflect upon yourself, your point of view, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, and even your biases, and this is, and even just to surprise yourself, finding something that in principle you were not even aware of. And why do you think that is so challenging? Because we've all had this experience that this is not easy to explain what the paradigm is. What do you think that is the reason?
Actually, for me as a PhD student, I really get confused. Just because sometimes I'm reading things and then it's kind of, researchers would say the same things with different meaning, or it's the same meaning but different terms. So sometimes I'm really confused. And I have the feeling that this is difficult for many of my colleagues as well. And then there's the problem that, we don't really have courses, seminars where it's explained to us. So I think that would be important just because it's a very conceptual literature with highly abstract notions. So it would be great to be a little bit more into that kind of teaching as well.
So Jaime, you are a professor. What can we do now about paradigms? How can paradigms be taught to students?
Well, first, to know and to be aware of what Sina was saying. And that is very difficult for many people just to understand what the paradigm is, because it comes from another tradition, it's very conceptual, it's a very difficult literature. And then to look at what very influential people did in this area. For example, if you just see someone who designed a new paradigm, this French philosopher Foucault, you see that, for example, he spent the first 2 chapters of his book talking about something which seems to be very far from the academy, from this painting Las Meninas. And the other day, in the seminar that we were conducting, we found out that you can learn a lot about paradigms just by looking at a painting. Something like this, something unexpected, and you can learn, for example, what these people of paradigms understand by ontological assumptions, what is objective, subjective, what is the truth. And if you try to approach the issue from a more theoretical perspective, it's very easy to get lost. So what I would suggest is just to move in this direction. And many people assume that it's not academic enough, but we are talking about the big academics, right? I mean, Foucault is not academic. Many other people publishing on that area and taking examples from many different areas, probably there must be a model to imitate. And what is very interesting is that nobody, as far as we know, and we have tried to find some information, has followed that route. So what I think is just to think about the audience, to know that it's difficult, and to try to work in that direction, trying to make their life easier and to find out something that is vital for them. But apart from painting, we have been discussing the possibility of using other sources, like, for example, books or films. Would you have any example that you can share with us?
Absolutely, Jaime. I think films are great possibilities. We have human beings, we have a history, we have a context, and we have all this interaction. And I think it's fantastic to use it to illustrate such abstract concepts like paradigms. And when we talked together, we thought about the film Babel. Here we have 4 different contexts. We have Morocco, Japan, US and Mexico, but we can also see that these contexts are linked together. There are relationships, there's a story. And this is why Babel is a great film, I think, to illustrate the power of different paradigms, different worldviews, perspectives, and interpretations.
Yeah, perhaps also for the audience, right? If you see the film, there's a crime, and you will have many different people, and they will come from a different background. They will have different perspectives due to their background. So I think that's very important to underline, and this is where the paradigms come in, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. This is a great example because, for example, traditionally, when you do a study, you only conduct the study from one view, right? And then you say, I'm going to reflect what reality is. But in this film, you have the cases of crimes that are perceived very differently by different people. And something that I also like about this film is that, for example, we talk a lot about even identity for paradigms and things like that. And they also emphasize things that people have in common, right? Mm-hmm. So that's an element that is fantastic in those films, just to explore a bit further.
Yeah. And Jaime, we had another idea, another film. What is this film about?
Well, we were talking, I mean, the problem here is once you see that it's relevant to be used in films is to choose the right film, because there might be a lot of examples, but there was one that it was very interesting in our conversation. That is Match Point, right? Because you were telling me that you love Match Point. Mm-hmm. I also love Match Point. You haven't seen it yet, but you will. And then what happens? That the Match Point that you saw is different from the one that I saw. Because I remember that in the first 3 minutes of the film, you have the character, who is called Chris, like you, and then he's reading Crime and Punishment. That's my favorite, probably, novel.
It's a novel from Dostoevsky.
From Dostoevsky. And then from that moment on, I was looking at the link between the novel and the film. And for me, the novel, or the film, is a kind of moral dilemma. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I was just looking at this through Dostoevsky's eyes.
Yeah.
For you, the movie is not the moral
dilemma. When I saw the movie, I wasn't aware of the book. It's just a few seconds. So I had a completely different interpretation of classes, of Americans, of British. So I think we had a very, very different interpretation of the film.
Very interesting. And this is what we were talking the other day when we were saying that, for example, in the paradigms literature, people say that observations are not neutral, that they are theory laden. Mm-hmm. I mean, that they are affected by our theoretical frameworks. Mm-hmm. Something not easy to understand, but with this and many other examples coming from films, you can make it visible in a much easier way.
Yeah.
So what would you say? What is the expected outcome of our great project? What would you say? What's kind of the message? What do we want to do? What would we like to underline?
Yeah, I think we have different ideas, and one would be an article. To write an article, a good article, conceptual, but which is understandable for students. Mm-hmm. So just to bring this difficult subject of paradigms, sometimes very theoretical, to bring it down and illustrate it by films, by paintings. Exactly. And this would be the message.
Exactly, and so we have kind of a teaching tool as well, right? Mm-hmm. Using these films and so on, so it can really be kind of an approach to have people involved without just writing, reading textbooks and so on. I think that's a great kind of method, new method.
Yes, I think that the topic is so important that you need different resources. No, I mean, this paper, why we need it? Because it's true that you can see or understand many notions thanks to these films, but then you need some time to reflect on them, mm-hmm. right? And in a paper, you will have that time. Mm-hmm. And you also have these teaching tools, And you are forgetting something very important too.
Yes, we also have a call for papers and a special issue in the journal, International Journal of Cross-Cultural Management. And we would like to open the field and have original ideas and how can we work and how can we make these paradigms more accessible to a wider public. Yeah.
And also, right, an outcome that we need to explore is just to find other potential resources so that we can continue working on this, which is not, is sad in a way to think that once the paper is done, once the teaching tools are done, we don't have anything else to do. I think that there is a whole avenue of things that are open.
Absolutely.
Don't we want to motivate people, to get people involved, right? That's our goal as well.
Absolutely.
So,
and we're just at the start.
Yeah.